he has got to give the impression that this is a different cabinet, not only from the Starmer cabinet, but from the Brown and Blair cabinet.
Yeah.
There will be quite a few people in his cabinet who did serve both under Blair and Brown, and that's the balance that he's somehow got to achieve.
So then, we've been talking about Burnham's premiership this morning and the dilemmas he has when it comes to appointing his cabinet. The Times today has a huge, long read for you on the people who he will need to keep happy, the people who are angling for jobs, the people who deserve jobs. The case to be made for the likes of Ed Miliband. Will he become the Chancellor? What about Angela Rayner? Is her return to the Cabinet now overdue? Shabana Mahmood is likely to stay as Home Secretary. Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, is likely looking for a better job. What about Johnny Reynolds, the Chief Whip? That role may be redundant if Andy Burnham abandons the whipping system. Heidi Alexander's a Burnham ally. Will she remain in transport, or is she looking for a promotion? How much does this cabinet then, this fantasy cabinet at this point, sure, but these names that are in the frame, how much do they represent the change that Andy Burnham is so determined to demonstrate? To what extent can we refer to this as a fresh lineup? Or actually, is this just more of the same? And I don't just mean from Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet. What about Tony Blair's cabinet, of which Andy Burnham himself was a member? It seems like this altogether may feel quite familiar. Let's speak to Phil Webster, former Times political editor. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning.
I'm just quite taken by the fact that Andy Burnham may appoint people like, for example, David Miliband to the House of Lords to become Foreign Secretary. There's talk that Ed Balls may be put in the House of Lords to become an advisor as well. These are all people, starting with Andy Burnham himself, that you've reported on during their previous eras in government, really. How do you reflect on how they acted then, and 20 or 30 years on, how they may perform in government now?
Well, I think Andy Burnham has really... He's got to be careful about giving the impression that he's getting the old gang back together again. And yes, you can see an obvious case for David Miliband coming back after all those years, after 16 years since he was defeated by his brother for the leadership of the Labour Party. But there is an obvious case for David Miliband coming back. I saw the Ed Balls speculation overnight. That looked a little bit fanciful, the idea of him going to the Lords, but who knows? He's got to balance it. He's got to balance bringing back people of known ability. His chief of staff is somebody, of course, who is of known ability and will advise him on these kind of matters. But he has got to give the impression that this is a different cabinet, not only from the Starmer cabinet, but from the Brown and Blair cabinet.
Yeah.
There will be quite a few people in his cabinet who did serve both under Blair and Brown, and that's the balance that he's somehow got to achieve. I wouldn't mind predicting now that there'll be more women in the Burnham cabinet than men, but whether they will be in the very top offices of state is another question.
Yeah. Was Andy Burnham impressive as a cabinet member in your time reporting on that particular chapter, Phil?
Well, yeah, I knew Andy Burnham from the days he was a very junior researcher to Tessa Jowell. The thing to say about Andy Burnham from the very start is he is an ultra politician. He always has been. He's known which way the wind is blowing. He's been laughed at over the years for moving from one faction to another. But that is because he knows where that wind is blowing. And he was an effortless Blairite, and he became an effortless Brownite. And he, of course, worked... he was around during the Corbyn years, but he is a politician through and through. Yes, he was a politician of ability. He was praised by members of all parties for his efforts to try and get an agreement on social care in the latter years of the Brown government. And that was almost achieved, although the Conservatives did pull the plug on that at the last moment when an agreement was about to be done. But nobody would say he was lacking in ability.
Yeah, I think that's so fascinating to hear. And then we have the likes, as we're mentioning, of Miliband, of Ed Balls, and actually we should mention James Purnell as his Chief of Staff, who the Times reports today they've begun, I should say, their access talks with the civil service. And in the room have been Andy Burnham, James Purnell and Louise Haigh, who was Keir Starmer's Transport Secretary, but has been really a crucial part of Operation Burnham so far. Talk to us a bit about James Purnell and his ability then in government and how he will use that as a Chief of Staff now.
Well, James is a very thoughtful politician. I know him extremely well. Played a lot of golf with Mr. Purnell. He's not a great golfer, but I have played quite a bit of golf with him.
Excellent.
He's, as I say, he's very, very able politician. He rose. He worked under Blair in Number 10 for quite a bit of time, and then it was Gordon Brown who brought him into the cabinet. And of course, his resignation from the cabinet, which the Times did report exclusively at the time, was quite a big event in the Brown years. But yes, he's a considerable asset to Andy Burnham. He's quiet, reflective. He will have been sitting quietly beside Andy Burnham in those talks with the civil service, nodding his head, possibly shaking his head, and then coming away from it and giving Andy Burnham his views of the way things should proceed. I'm sure, will have quite a bit of say in the makeup of that cabinet, certainly in terms of helping Burnham achieve the balance that he will obviously feel he needs.
Yeah, definitely. I'm finding this insight so fascinating. This is exactly what we need because of that, because of the kind of overlap of all of these different Labour eras. And actually, if we were to focus on foreign affairs, which in an interview published this morning, Sir Keir Starmer says that Andy Burnham is going to need to pay quite a bit of attention to foreign affairs. It's something that Burnham, I think, has been trying to sort of say, look, I want to focus more on domestic issues perhaps than foreign affairs. We mentioned David Miliband's possible return. It sounds like Jonathan Powell will remain in post as well as National Security Advisor, and perhaps there'll be a return for Ollie Robbins, who was sacked not that long ago from the civil service side of the Foreign Office as well. To what extent, Phil, can foreign affairs be delegated, dare I say, can be devolved by Andy Burnham to the likes of Miliband, Powell and Robbins? Would that be a legitimate approach?
I don't think it'll be possible. I agree with Keir Starmer on this. I mean, even in the dying days of Keir Starmer's administration, he's off on various foreign trips It would be very strange if a Prime Minister of a country did not attend. At the NATO summit, Ankara, it would be very strange if Keir Starmer wasn't there and if Andy Burnham wasn't there. And he may start off with this aspiration. His choice of Foreign Secretary is obviously very important. We know that he has been talking to the present incumbent, Yvette Cooper, getting himself briefed up on foreign affairs and the issues that are bound to arise in the first days and weeks of his premiership. And of course, the Ukraine war is not going to go away. The continuing doubts over whether the Iran ceasefire is going to hold. He will have to deal with those issues on day one. And although he might have a very good foreign secretary in Yvette Cooper or even David Miliband beside him, he's going to have to make big decisions himself. Those big decisions will either be taken in number 10 in London or number 10 in the north.
Yeah.
But they're going to be taken by him.
And just as a final thought then, and to sort of bring this back somewhat to where we started, having heard your assessment of some of these key characters who have been around a bit and who have got experience and who may have dependable reputations based on those experiences in previous jobs, how can Andy Burnham say this is change, this is something different? Is there a way that he can navigate that messaging effectively?
Well, I think he's made a decent start on that with his speech earlier this week. He's been criticised for the lack of detail there, but the general idea, the depth of his devolution plans, if anything like them are achieved, that will be changed for this country. And as the Times has noted this week, it does imply a movement of power away from the Treasury to the north. Big decisions will be taken by the regional authorities that would previously have been taken down below. So I think that is change. If he's absolutely committed to taking some of the public utilities back under public control, not necessarily ownership, but under public control. That will be seen as change. I anticipate that will be one of the very first big announcements he makes when he gets into number 10, the detail of how he's going to do that. So I think there are plenty of things in the pipeline, and he's going to have a budget pretty quickly as well, because there are so many questions piling up over the attitude he will take to the hole in the defence budget and a lot of matters like that. He has his own ideas about taxation, as we've heard again this week. Changes are not ruled out, even if he is going to stick to the manifesto on the very big pledges. But there will be big changes coming on tax as well. Yeah. I think we're going to know well before Christmas that change of some kind is underway. Yeah. And a lot of that there will be a lot of new faces or old faces coming back in that cabinet. It's going to look like a different cabinet in 3 weeks' time.
Really interesting, Phil. Thank you so much for your perspective and insight. We appreciate that. Thanks. Now, that is Phil Webster, who was political editor of The Times when Tony Blair was in power. Does all of that, all of these people, do they represent change, something fresh, or do you like the experience that these people will bring?